Hey everybody, welcome to another video review. So today I'm going to be talking about the Hanayama square puzzle in, again, cast metal. It's a very beautiful puzzle in gold and silver interlocking pieces. It's one of Hanayama's, I think, prettiest puzzles. Now, whether it's a good puzzle or not, I think we can talk about. But certainly one of the in terms of quality, it's one of their best ones. And they make great die cast, of course, puzzles for everything. I think they have close to 80 of them or more. But this is definitely very heavy. You can definitely feel the weight of it. It's very, very, again, beautiful. Red and silvers interdigitating. And this is called Square. Let me show you the name. As with all of their puzzles, they have the brand name as well as the name of the puzzle engraved somewhere on it. And as with a lot of Hanayama puzzles, this is not purely just to tell you what it is and it's authentic, but it often is very useful to give you this little tiny mark, the name and the brand, the name of the puzzle and the brand, to give you an orientation for how to figure this out. This is depending on where you buy it. Again, it's kind of interesting. The scale, whether it's a level 6 or 5, it kind of changes depending, I think, on when they reissue it and where you buy it and all of that stuff. It's been described alternatively as a level 6 versus a level 5 puzzle. I mean, I think currently it might be level 5, but when I bought it in the box, it said it was level 6. And again, this is supposedly one of the tougher puzzles to figure out. Now, whether this is true or not, I will leave up to you when we begin to solve it and then examine it. So the build, the color, it's gorgeous. Okay, so let's talk about the puzzle. So the puzzle is the following. You need to take it apart. As with all Hanayama puzzles, you have to take it apart, put it back together to disassemble and to assemble. Okay, and in this case, if you begin to fiddle with it, you will notice by just sort of pulling on the edges, on the corners, you will see that it begins to open up. But just when this thing is about to slip out and everything's about to slip out, it kind of locks in place. And no matter what you do, you can't get it to release. And then you put it together, you can turn it over, and you will find that it's exactly the same problem. You can pull from the gold corners, you can pull from the silver, you can turn it around and do the same thing, and no matter what you do, you are not able to get it out, no matter what, okay? It just seems stuck. Now, one of the things about this puzzle that I think is a little bit limiting, if we want to get into my review and my thoughts about it, is while it's very impressive looking, it's beautiful to hold, it's a little bit limited in my opinion in terms of you can even see the reflection of my camera, it's so shiny. It's a little bit limited in terms of the moves you can do. So for a lot of the other puzzles, there's so many variations, there's so many different things that you can play with and you can do. And that, of course, makes the puzzle very difficult. Now, this is supposed to be one of the more difficult ones, level 5, 6, depending on, again, where you buy it and all that. But if you look at it, the problem here is like, where are the variety of moves, right? For like a puzzle, say like Enigma or Equa or the padlock. There seems to be a lot of different maneuvers you can do. And of course, the more maneuvers you do, the harder it is to solve because there's so many things you can potentially try. But with this puzzle with Square, there really isn't any moves. I mean, it's like, this is it, this is it, and this is it, and there's nothing else you can do. I mean, you can't twist, whatever, it's just literally a square. And so when you do that, you begin to, I think, limit the creativity, limit the potential, and then to some extent you have to limit the difficulty, right? So my guess is, I think this has been proven by a lot of people who've also reviewed this and solved it on YouTube. The majority of people who disassemble is going to disassemble this accidentally. Now, how are they going to do that? It's because they're going to be fiddling with it. And usually when you're trying to open it and you can't, and there's really nothing else to do, right? You can give up or you continue doing it, is they begin to lift it up and they begin to try to, open and then shift around and that type of thing. And in doing so, that's how it's going to come apart. So let me show you, sort of laying it down here, how that would work, okay? So I'm going to go from a horizontal to a vertical position, and then let's see if it just sort of wriggles free here. Let's see if this puzzle is going to cooperate with us. Come on. Let's see what it does for us. Now, if it doesn't seem to be working, what I can do is I can flip it over like this. It's a new orientation, and you see, it fell apart. So I think in watching me do this, you pretty much figured out that to get it to fall apart, you have to try to open, but from a vertical position rather than a horizontal. But to understand why this works, you have to try to reassemble it. And reassembling it does get a little bit tricky. So, for instance, if you put these two together, you can see that interlocks very beautifully. And it opens just like that. There's literally nothing preventing it from opening. So why then the difficulty in disassembling? Because, looking at it very carefully, there's another potential way that these two pieces can come together. There's this way, but you can also come together like this, okay? And if you do that, and then you put it into the horizontal position, or even at an angle position, you will lock in place, and these things cannot be unlocked, okay? Now, if you go horizontal, you will find it opens up very nicely. Let's try it again. Horizontal, we can't do it. But if you go vertical, let's see if this happens, like if you go vertical like this, does this work? Vertical, it does. So as you can see, the key is to not go horizontal, not go angled, but in fact to go vertical. And if you go vertical, it will come right out. So what is it about the vertical position that makes this thing so special, right? Well, you have to look very carefully. Well, not that carefully. I'm pretty sure it's pretty obvious now. You can see that there is obviously a little tiny pin in the hole here. It's mirrored right over here. And if you let gravity take its course, you can see that both pins drop out. It's gravity dependent, okay? So now obviously it becomes pretty obvious that if you go horizontal, one of the pins is going to drop, right? If you go this way, the pin on the silver side is going to drop and it's going to lock in, you can't open it. If you go the other way, the gold pin will go down and you can't open it. So why then, well that's like a little magic trick. Why then does it vertically all of a sudden magically open? What happens to the pins when you go vertical and then you open? Well, the key is to look at where the pins drop. So the pin on the gold is going to, when you fully put it together, it's going to drop in this depression right here. And you can see that if it drops in that depression, it's going to prevent it from opening, right? Imagine the pin from the gold side dropping in here, right? You can see how it's going to catch and not going to open. The pin on the silver side will go into this gold groove. But if you look very carefully, I'm going to go real close to the camera. If you go really carefully, check it out. The silver, you can see, is just a groove, a depression. But the red, the gold, look at the gold. You see that it's cast in such a way that there's a ramp. Okay, and that ramp is actually critical because if you close it like this, you try to open, you can't. But if you put the orientation this way, so the gravity is moving the pin down a little bit, that ramp will actually cause the pin to release, and you'll be able to pull all the way out. It's a really actually beautiful mechanism. And so that explains why you couldn't disassemble it until you turn it vertical and in just the exact orientation so that it falls. So in actuality, if you can remember it, if you do this orientation and you jiggle, it should just fall right off. You see that? Now, depending on how you put the pieces together, because of course all of these are perfectly symmetrical, you may change up the orientation of where those pins are, and that's why you're randomly just sort of jiggling. When the puzzle first came to me, it was set up in a certain situation where this had to be a certain, I think, direction. If you put this down and then you turn it like that and you jiggle, it'll just fall apart. But once you do this puzzle a couple times and you're not paying attention, you can just reassemble it randomly. I mean, you don't even have to have the silver and the red on opposite sides. You can have it together. And if you do that, it will change the orientation of where the pins are, and therefore you're going to have to just randomly sort of go back and forth, and then you just jiggle to see which side will have this thing fall down, like this, okay? I suppose if I put it together, I can do it in a fashion where you can control it. So for instance, if I want to do it this way, let's just say I want to have, for sake of argument, let's just say I want to have this facing down to release it, right? So what I would do is I would rig it. So I would put this, of course, here. Now, at this point, it's important, when you're putting it together, you want to put it so that the pinhole is just covered by the end of the curved arms. So this goes right over here, and like on the opposite side, you can see that the silver part goes over the pinhole here, see? So you want to create a situation where the two of them interlock just perfectly like this. If you do that and you just cover the pins, you will create enough give that everything should slide together, and you should be able to close it perfectly. So I'll demonstrate. But you've got to have it perfectly there, because if you go a little bit too far, the pin will drop, and then it won't work. Okay? So again, let's demonstrate. It's got to be right there, over the pinhole, over the pinhole. Here's where it gets tricky. You want to kind of hold it in place, because if you layer it down, if you put it down and then you sort of move it, it might be in the wrong position again. So let's do that. Okay, and I think we wanted the side at the bottom, right? Okay, so let's do it this way. And now we have to sort of play around with this. So you can do this, but then it'll be gold and gold, right? So you want to flip it so that the gold will be on the bottom and the silver will be at the top. Let's open it up. Okay, so hopefully we're going to be perfectly positioned this way. I think I'm perfectly positioned here. And now we're going to try to put everything together just like that. As you can see, you put it together, and if you did everything right, it should be able to sort of wriggle its way closed. Okay, just like this, and then boop, it all slots together. So remember that when you open it, it's going to open. It should open with no problems. The only reason you can't open it is because the pins internally are locking it in position. You see that? It's the pins that are preventing everything from sliding apart. If there weren't the pins, if the pins are not engaged, it would just fall apart, which is the idea. And I think I showed you when we put it back together again that the way to disengage the pins is to again turn it from here into the horizontal, into the vertical component. Now, because you saw me put it together, you know that the pins are actually here and here, here and here. There's no pins preventing these two guys from coming apart. And so if you have the pins here and here, we orient it with square Hanayama. So if you have it all set up perfectly, you can layer it at the bottom, and then everybody's gonna try to pull it apart. They go, oh, we can't do it, it's stuck. But you pull it apart here. So I hope that this puzzle doesn't make me look like a fool, okay? Because if everything works right, and I've kind of jury-rigged it, so I put it together, if I go completely vertical, and I know that horizontally there's no pin, it's all vertical. On this segment, this is where the pin is. So doing this, gravity should help me to release the sides. So let's see if this works. Again, we oriented it so that square Hanayama is at the bottom, and then you want to cover the square Hanayama so it's essentially covered. So here we go, square Hanayama right here, flip it, it should fall apart. Okay, here it goes. Oh, come on. Well, so much for that. So I must be doing something wrong. When I put it together, it worked out fine. Is it the opposite? One of the orientations will cause it to fall out, as you saw earlier. And I thought I rigged it so that if we put this down at the bottom, it should do it. Well, let me turn it around. Oh, there it is. So yeah, I had the orientation backwards. So as you can see, once you find the right orientation and you pull, everything just drops. So hopefully you have some appreciation for how everything goes. I can certainly do it again, I guess. I'll put it together. So here we go. Here's our the pins. So we'll go like this, okay? Just like that. And then of course on this side, we have the other pin. And we will figure out how we want to put it here. We're going to put it like this. Okay, hopefully I didn't screw that up. I think it's pretty reasonable. And then just sort of go like that, okay? So once again, there you go. I have to experiment a little bit more to figure out exactly how to put it together so that you have this one orientation where if you lift straight up, it will disengage. Again, the way it disengages, that's why the hint for this puzzle is called orientation. It just, the first part of the orientation obviously is you have to get vertical. But whether you do it from here and then do that, or whether you have to turn it around and then you go from here and you do it, you see, there you go, it opened apart. However you want to do it, you have to figure out the right orientation. And depending on how you put it together again, of course, will determine, what orientation you have to basically lift it to get rid of it. So, this will be the third time I put it together. So hopefully again, you see the two pins. We cover it so that the pins are covered. Okay, it's going to give you a little bit of stretch. And then we're going to put the silver up top. So here we go. Takes a little bit of wriggling around. And then put together. Boom, put it together. So pretty easy to do once you know how to do it. I'm not going to take it apart another time. So hopefully, you have a good sense of how we are making it happen. I think here I feel it already. I think it's definitely going to pull apart. Yeah, you see, I can feel it pulling apart right now. So I've kind of recreated it so that this is actually now the right orientation. Where if you do twist it like this, you can feel it actually about to. There's no locking. You can feel it moving. So I'm going to put it together again. So what are my overall thoughts? I love the build. I think it's just such a beautiful thing. Really, really really tactile, love kind of playing with it. But I think as a puzzle, it's a little bit disappointing because the key to it is a mechanism that you really have very little chance of figuring out. I guess if you held it like this and you just shook it, I don't know if you can hear that. You can hear something moving inside it, so maybe that's a hint that maybe it's like a little something, a little pin. It depends on sort of your puzzle mojo and how much experience you have with these types of puzzles. And maybe you will instinctively figure out, oh, there must be something to it. But without knowing the internal mechanism, it's just really difficult to be able to figure out how you go about it. But then that's made up for by the fact that there's nothing to do. If you don't lift it like this, there's really nowhere to go. And so just through experimentation and jiggling, even somebody who has no idea how to do it is going to make it come apart. Now, you can argue, of course, that to completely solve a Hanayama piece, simply accidentally disassembling is not good enough. You have to be able to, of course, reassemble it. Therein is the true test of your understanding of the puzzle. But my argument here is that if you actually are able to disassemble it, right, then in doing so, you're able to have the pieces all laid out. You're able to examine each piece like I did. And then it's a lot easier, frankly, to be able to find out those pins as you begin to try to put it together and you find out that you can't. And then you have to ask yourself, when you are not doing 4 pieces, but only 2 pieces are locked and won't come apart, it's a lot easier to experiment with 2 pieces, a gold and a silver, for instance, put together and figure out why is it not coming apart and then coming apart and then not coming apart and then coming apart. And with only 2 pieces to worry about, you very quickly find out the mechanism. And once you find out that mechanism, it's, frankly, child's play to then figure out how the 4 pieces should be lined up to be assembled again. So in my opinion, I think that this, this Hanayama puzzle, the square puzzle, probably doesn't really deserve to be a 6. It's definitely one of the easier 5s or 6s, especially when compared with like a level 5 like Iqua, which is just mind-blowing, or like a level 6 Enigma, which is Legend. This is a rather poor, I think, a rather poor example of a supposedly very, very difficult puzzle. I don't think you need to be a master puzzle solver to be able to figure this out. And if I had to grade this, I would probably grade this more like a 3, maybe 4 max. I would say a 3 here is actually more fair to kind of, describe this. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed solving the Hanayama square with me and kind of going through the review. And I do think this is worth $10, $12. It's a gorgeous puzzle and you can have people play with it. I really like it. But in terms of difficulty, just be aware that you'll be buying this more for the beauty. But the actual solution, unfortunately, at least by Hanayama's high standards, is rather trivial. And certainly not worthy of a level 6. In my box, this was a level 6, which is crazy. To put this in the same company as, for instance, an Enigma or a Nutcase, for instance. There's just no way. But good, cute puzzle, beautiful finish. And I think the next one I'm going to put up is going to be of the legendary Iqua puzzle. That'll be the next one I upload. And then you can see, that one's by the way, a 45-minute upload, okay? So you can truly appreciate, I think, the difference in complexity when you see that video. All right, until next time, do take care.